They laughed behind his back, whispered when he passed through the halls, called him names they thought he couldn't hear: old man, floor mop, janitor, nobody. But not once did Henry Thomas flinch. Not once did he raise his voice or defend himself. He just kept sweeping, scrubbing, replacing broken light bulbs, fixing jammed lockers, picking up after students who wouldn't give him the time of day. To them, he was invisible, a shadow with a mop. No one knew that the man they ridiculed every day was the very reason the building stood. It all started on a rainy Monday morning. The students of Jefferson Academy shuffled in grumbling, wet shoes squeaking on polished floors. A group of senior boys huddled near the trophy case, laughing as Henry walked by with his cart of cleaning supplies. "Hey, watch it, mop man," sneered Kyle Bennett, the quarterback, sliding a wet footprint across the hallway. "Missed a spot." Henry glanced at the mess, then slowly reached down with his cloth and cleaned it. "Geez, how long's he been here?" another boy asked, poking at the janitor's cart. "Is he, like, part of the furniture now?" "Pretty sure he came with the building." Kyle laughed. "Probably sleeps in the boiler room." As the boys erupted into laughter, a girl standing nearby frowned. Her name was Maya Henderson, quiet, observant, always carrying a camera and notebook. She didn't join in. Something about the old man's eyes, tired but kind, sad but knowing, made her uneasy about their jokes. "You guys are mean," she muttered under her breath. Kyle scoffed. "Come on, Maya. He's just a janitor." Maya's brow furrowed. "You ever talk to him?" "Nope. Why would I?" Maya looked back at Henry, who was now wiping down a row of lockers. His movements were slow but purposeful. She made a mental note to ask him something later. That same afternoon, Principal Daniels stood at the podium in the auditorium, announcing a new scholarship program funded by an anonymous donor. Everyone buzzed with excitement. "The donor wishes to remain unnamed for now," Daniels said, "but I assure you, they've been part of this school's legacy since the very beginning." Henry stood at the back of the auditorium, arms folded, unnoticed as always. But Maya saw him. She always did. That night, Maya stayed late to finish her yearbook photos. As she wandered the halls with her camera, she found Henry in the library, replacing a light bulb on a shaky ladder. "Mr. Thomas," she called softly. He paused, then climbed down slowly. "Evenin', Miss Henderson." She hesitated. "Do you mind if I ask you a question?" Henry chuckled. "You just did, but go on." She smiled. "Why do you work here? I mean, you seem really smart, and, I don't know, you just don't seem like someone who'd be a janitor their whole life." Henry looked at her for a long moment. Then he sat down on the edge of a table and patted the seat next to him. "You ever hear of the Jefferson Youth Center?" "Yeah," she nodded. "My dad said it burned down like 20 years ago." Henry nodded. "It didn't burn down. It was torn down. Developers wanted to build luxury condos. Said the kids didn't need a place to stay after school. Said it was a waste of space. That's terrible." Maya said, "It was. So I did something about it." She looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" "I used every penny I had saved, 47 years of labor, construction work, odd jobs to buy the land. Then I went to the school board with a plan. A school that didn't just teach facts but taught kids how to dream, how to lead, how to serve others." Her eyes widened. "Wait, what are you saying?" Henry smiled, eyes crinkling with a quiet warmth. "I built this school, Maya, me and a handful of folks who believed in the idea. Named it after my father, Jefferson Thomas. That's why they call it Jefferson Academy." She stared at him, mouth slightly open. "But why are you cleaning?" "Because the school ran out of funds years ago," he said. "I gave up the title, the recognition, the salary, just to keep it open. The board didn't want a former construction worker as the face of their prestigious academy. But I stayed. I stayed to keep the lights on, to clean the halls, to fix what breaks, to protect what I built." Maya sat there, stunned. "No one knows." He shook his head. "Didn't matter to me. I built it for the kids, not for glory. But they treat you like trash." Henry shrugged. "It's easy to judge someone when you don't know their story." That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She thought about all the time she'd watched Henry being mocked, ignored, passed by. The next day, She told her journalism teacher she was switching her final project. Instead of doing a feature on the new football coach, she wanted to profile someone the world needs to know. Over the next few weeks, she interviewed Henry in secret, collecting photos, old blueprints, dusty newspaper clippings, and faded Polaroids. She even tracked down a retired teacher who remembered Henry's speech at the school's opening ceremony. Then, at the end of year assembly, Maya stood on stage. I was going to talk about student achievement, she said, voice shaking. But today, I want to tell you a story about a man we all see every day. A man most of us have never really looked at. She clicked the remote, and behind her, a giant photo of Henry appeared on the projector, not as a janitor but standing in a hard hat, holding blueprints in front of a half-constructed building. Gasps rippled through the crowd. That's Mr. Henry Thomas, Maya continued. He didn't just clean this school, he built it, brick by brick, paid for it with his own money, fought for it when no one else would. Whispers grew louder. Teachers stared. Principal Daniels stood up slowly. While we laughed, he worked. While we looked down on him, he looked after us. The school wouldn't exist without him. A hush fell over the auditorium. And the worst part, Maya's voice trembled. We treated him like nothing. Silence. Then a single pair of hands started clapping. It was Kyle. Soon, the whole auditorium was on its feet. Henry stood in the doorway, mop still in hand. Tears streamed down his face. Principal Daniels rushed to the mic. Mr. Thomas, please come up here. Henry hesitated, then slowly walked to the stage. The students parted like the Red Sea. When he stepped up, the applause thundered louder. I don't know what to say, Henry whispered, blinking. Say anything, Maya said, handing him the mic. He took it, hand trembling. All I ever wanted was to build a place where kids could grow. I didn't need thanks. I just needed to know it mattered. The room was so quiet you could hear his breath. But thank you, he whispered, for seeing me. From that day on, everything changed. Henry's photo was hung in the front office. A plaque was placed at the entrance, founded by Henry Thomas, a visionary with a mop and a dream. The students who once laughed now greeted him with respect. Kyle even joined the maintenance club. Maya's article was picked up by local news. Donations poured in. The school expanded. But Henry stayed the same. Every morning, he still swept the halls, still tightened every loose screw, still smiled at every student who passed. Because for Henry, it was never about being seen. It was about seeing them. And now, they finally saw him too. Henry stood at the center of the stage, light from the auditorium's overheads, casting a gentle glow over his weathered face. His eyes, tired from years of labor, but now glistening with emotion, scanned the crowd of students, teachers, and staff, all standing in thunderous ovation. But the one face he locked onto was Maya's. She had tears streaming down her cheeks, her camera hanging forgotten around her neck, hands clutched to her heart. Principal Daniels took the microphone from Henry gently and turned to the crowd. We owe this man more than we can ever repay, he said, his voice cracking. Mr. Thomas, from this day forward, you will no longer be referred to as our janitor. You will be honored as our founder, our visionary, and our hero. A roar of applause erupted again, but Henry just shook his head softly and leaned in to whisper to the principal. Daniels turned to the mic again. He says, he wants to keep working, that this place still needs hands willing to scrub the grime, to polish the shine, to make sure it stands tall every morning. And if that's not the soul of a true leader, I don't know what is. In the crowd, even the most hardened students wiped their eyes. Kyle, who once mocked Henry the loudest, now stood like a statue, guilt carving deep into his face. He pushed through the crowd as Henry stepped off the stage. Mr. Thomas, sir, Kyle stammered. I'm so sorry. For everything I said, I didn't know. Henry smiled kindly. Now you do. I want to help, Kyle said quickly. I mean it. Anything you need. I want to be better. Henry put a hand on the boy's shoulder. Then start by helping others, the way you wish you'd help me. That moment changed Kyle. He joined the janitorial club, and eventually started a student volunteer initiative one, where the school's most popular and gifted students spent at least a few hours each week helping clean the school grounds, not as punishment but as gratitude. Over the next few days, local news vans lined the street outside Jefferson Academy. Reporters swarmed the halls. Everyone wanted an interview with the mysterious janitor who built a school and never told a soul. When one particularly persistent anchor shoved a mic in Henry's face, asking why he kept it all secret, Henry looked straight into the camera and said, "Because you don't need a spotlight to make a difference. You just need love and patience." The clip went viral overnight. Henry Thomas became a symbol of quiet heroism. Offers flooded in from publishers wanting his biography, schools offering him honorary degrees, even celebrities asking for interviews. But Henry declined most of them, except one. A letter arrived at the school, embossed with gold and stamped with the seal of the state governor. "We would be honored," the letter read, "to present Mr. Henry Thomas with the Distinguished Citizen Award for lifelong service and contribution to education." Principal Daniels read the letter aloud during a staff meeting. The room exploded in applause. "I'm not sure he'll accept," Daniels said. "You know how modest he is." But this time, Henry did accept. The ceremony was held in the city's Grand Hall. The governor.mayor.school board and hundreds of students, staff, and citizens packed the room. Maya was asked to document the entire event. When Henry walked on stage in a press suit borrowed, since he hadn't worn one in over 30 years, he looked every bit the legend he now was. As the governor pinned the medal on his chest, the crowd rose again in a standing ovation. The governor handed him the mic. "Mr. Thomas, would you like to say a few words?" Henry looked out at the crowd, then down at the medal. He held the microphone like it was a fragile egg. "I never imagined this," he said. "I started my life digging ditches, laying bricks, hauling lumber. Never finished high school until I was 38. But I always believed that if you build something with love, it can outlast you." He paused. "I built Jefferson Academy because I knew what it felt like to be overlooked. I wanted kids like me to have a place where they were seen, heard, loved." Another pause. His voice cracked. "And now, you've made me feel all that. Thank you." The crowd erupted. Back at school, a new statue was unveiled on the front lawn. Henry Thomas, holding a mop in one hand and a blueprint in the other, cast in bronze. Below it, the inscription read, "Founder, Father, Friend." But despite the fame, the recognition, and the accolades, Henry stayed the same every morning. He arrived before dawn, cleaned the bathrooms, tightened loose fixtures, made sure every hallway sparkled. He greeted every student by name, shared stories with teachers, replaced light bulbs before anyone noticed they were out. And every week, Maya would still find him sitting in the library, reading old yearbooks, smiling. One afternoon, she approached him with her camera. "Mr. Thomas, I want to turn your story into a documentary." He raised an eyebrow. "A what now?" "A full film. Your life. From start to now. I want the world to see the janitor who built a dream." He chuckled. "That's a mighty fancy title." She smiled. "I was thinking of calling it The Heart of Jefferson." Henry considered it, then nodded. "All right, but only if you promise one thing." "What?" "You show every crack in the wall, every mop, every bucket, not just the nice parts. Let them see what it really took." "I promise." The documentary, when it was released, won national acclaim. Students across the country sent Henry letters. Some wrote that they were inspired to go into education. Others said they were rethinking how they treated people at school. And in a quiet town halfway across the state, an elderly man who once worked construction sat in his living room watching the documentary. Tears filled his eyes as he saw the boy he once mentored change the world. That man was Jefferson Thomas, Henry's father, long thought deceased, but quietly living in a veteran's home. Maya had tracked him down after months of searching. When Henry found out, He broke down in tears. They reunited on campus, beneath the very tree Henry had planted on opening day. "Dad," Henry whispered, holding his father tight. "I finally did it." His father's voice shook. "You did more than that, son. You gave them a future." Years passed. Henry eventually retired, but not until he trained a full team of student custodians who had grown to respect the work and legacy behind every sweep of the broom. Kyle became a teacher. Maya became a renowned filmmaker. The school grew, adding wings named after the founding crew who helped Henry build the first foundation. But to every student who walked the halls, Henry Thomas was never just the janitor. He was the soul of Jefferson Academy, and long after the floors stopped echoing with his footsteps, the story of the man who built a dream with nothing but calloused hands and a quiet heart lived on in every classroom, every student, and every whispered legend that began. Did you know? Years had passed since that unforgettable day in the auditorium when Henry Thomas's name had echoed through the walls, not as the janitor, but as the founder of Jefferson Academy. The seasons changed. Graduating classes came and went. And with each new generation of students, the legend of Henry grew larger, not because he sought fame, but because his quiet strength had become the foundation of everything they stood on. One crisp autumn morning, the Jefferson Academy campus buzzed with preparations for its 30th anniversary Founders Week. The banners were bold and blue, reading, "Honor the heart, celebrate the soul." Henry Thomas, 30 years of Jefferson. Maya Henderson, now in her 30s and an acclaimed documentarian, returned to campus as the keynote speaker for the event. But she wasn't alone. She stepped out of a black car, holding the hand of a young boy, her son, Ezra, who was clutching a Jefferson Academy yearbook tight to his chest. As they walked through the gates, past the statue of Henry, Maya felt her chest tighten. The memories returned in vivid waves. That rainy afternoon in the library, the dusty light bulbs, Henry's voice as he revealed the truth she never expected. The courtyard was packed. Former students, teachers, alumni from decades ago. Principal Daniels, now retired, stood near the stage, looking every bit the proud patriarch of an institution that had become a national symbol. He hugged Maya like she was family. "I almost thought you wouldn't come," he whispered. "I would never miss this," Maya said. "I owe him everything." The crowd slowly gathered in front of the stage, where a large screen showed highlights from Maya's award-winning documentary. It featured clips of Henry repairing lockers, mentoring students, smiling at children with genuine love in his eyes. Soft piano music played in the background, and one by one, people in the crowd wiped away tears. Ezra tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Mommy, is that the janitor who built a school?" Maya nodded, her voice thick. "Yes, sweetheart, that's him. And he wasn't rich." "No," she whispered. "He was something better. He was good." When Maya took the stage, the applause was deafening. 30 years ago, she began, Jefferson Academy was just a dream, a structure, a place where students came to learn. But beneath all the walls and windows, there was a man quiet, overlooked, invisible to most, who built it with his bare hands, who swept the floors of the very school he founded, not for recognition but for love. She paused. "I was 17 when I met Henry Thomas. I thought I was writing a story about a janitor, but I was wrong. I was discovering a legend." The crowd fell silent, hanging on every word. "I'm here today," she continued, "not as a filmmaker, not as a speaker, but as one of the many people whose lives he touched. He didn't just clean floors. He cleaned the way we saw the world." The crowd rose to their feet once more. After Maya spoke, a special message played on the screen, a video Henry had recorded a year prior, before his health had begun to decline. He sat in the library, still wearing his old Jefferson Academy maintenance shirt, surrounded by photos and blueprints. "I'm not sure where I'll be when you see this," he said with a chuckle, "but I want you to know, I see you, every student, every teacher, Every single one of you who's kept this dream alive, you were always the point. He looked off to the side, eyes glistening. I didn't build Jefferson Academy for recognition. I built it because someone needed to. I cleaned because someone had to. And I stayed because, well, this place became my heart. He smiled. And if this old man taught you anything, I hope it's this. You don't have to wear a crown to lead. Sometimes all it takes is a mop and a mission. The screen went black. The silence afterward was sacred. No one moved, no one spoke. And then, slowly, Principal Daniels returned to the microphone. 2 weeks ago, we said goodbye to Henry. He passed peacefully, in his sleep, in the same home he lived in for 50 years. But his story, his impact, his legacy, they're immortal. He reached into a small wooden box and pulled out a set of keys. These, he said, holding them up, were Henry's. The first keys to the first doors ever installed in Jefferson Academy. And we're proud to announce that we're renaming the entire campus in his honor. Gasps filled the air. As of today, Daniels declared, this school will be known as the Henry Thomas Academy for Leadership and Learning. Cheers erupted, people crying and laughing all at once. Some teachers fell into each other's arms. Former students chanted his name, Henry, 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 and just beyond the stage, next to the statue, a new plaque was unveiled. Henry Thomas, 1948-2025, founder, builder, guardian of dreams. He cleaned more than floors, he cleared paths. In the years that followed, stories of Henry's legacy spread across the country. Schools began honoring their unsung heroes. Custodians were celebrated. Students were taught not just math and science, but humility, respect, and service. A scholarship was established in Henry's name, given each year to a student who demonstrated quiet leadership, perseverance, and empathy. And every morning at the Henry Thomas Academy, before the national anthem played over the speakers, a voice recording of Henry's final words echoed across the halls. If you want to build something that lasts, start with love and never stop sweeping. Ezra, now a student at the academy, often passed the bronze statue of Henry. He'd tap it on the shoe for luck before big exams, just like Maya once did. And whenever he heard students laugh too loudly or joke about someone cleaning a hallway, he would stop them. That's not just a janitor, he'd say, pointing to the name carved in gold letters. That's the man who built this place. And if you've got a school to stand in today, it's because he stood alone first. And so, in every hallway, polished to a shine, in every whisper of respect between students, in every lesson taught with care, the spirit of Henry Thomas lived on, forever sweeping, forever building, forever watching with quiet pride. Years drifted by, but the memory of Henry Thomas only grew stronger, engraved not just in statues and plaques, but in the very heartbeat of the Henry Thomas Academy. His story became part of the orientation for every new student. On their first day, freshmen were taken to the bronze statue where a tradition had begun. Each student placed a hand on Henry's mop and made a vow to lead with humility, to serve with purpose, and to never underestimate anyone based on a uniform. Ezra, now in his final year, had grown into a thoughtful, bright young man. His mother's values and Henry's legacy had shaped him, but the world outside was still imperfect. One morning, he found himself in the courtyard witnessing something that twisted his stomach. A younger student, small for his age and clearly new, had dropped his backpack, spilling books and papers. A group of boys walked past him, snickering instead of helping. Hey, careful, nerd. Maybe you need your own janitor. Ezra stepped forward immediately, crouched down beside the boy, and helped gather the scattered pages. Then he turned to the boys who had mocked him. You think it's funny, Ezra said, standing tall, because the man who used to pick up after everyone here, he's the reason you even have a school to walk through. He was a janitor, and he was also our founder. The boys looked uncertain. Ezra continued, you're standing on the floors he laid with his own hands, studying in rooms he designed. If you can't respect someone who does honest work, you don't deserve to wear this uniform. There was a pause. Then one of the boys quietly stepped forward and helped straighten the smaller kid's backpack. The others followed. It was a small moment, but that was how Henry's legacy lived on. Quietly, powerfully, through action. Later that week, Ezra was called into the head office. He assumed he was in trouble for confronting students, but instead, Principal Rivera, a young woman who had once been in Henry's volunteer cleanup program, sat behind her desk with a smile. "You're applying to colleges, right?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. Columbia. Maybe Howard. Well, we received a letter this morning," she said, holding up an envelope. "It's from the Thomas Foundation. They've selected you as this year's recipient of the Henry Thomas Honor Grant. Full tuition. Room and board." Ezra froze. "What?" he whispered. "Your mother filmed the story that changed this school forever. And you've spent your life continuing his mission. You've earned it." Ezra's hands trembled as he took the letter. It was signed by Maya Henderson and a small board of trustees, all former students Henry had touched. On graduation day, Ezra wore a sash that read Thomas Scholar. Maya stood in the audience, her heart bursting, as the names were called, and Ezra crossed the stage. He paused for a moment, just long enough to turn toward the statue near the bleachers. He raised a hand to his brow in a silent salute. In the crowd, other alumni had returned to celebrate. Kyle Bennett, once the arrogant quarterback, was now a community coach and youth mentor. He had started a nonprofit in Henry's name, the Quiet Builders, dedicated to uplifting overlooked workers in schools across the country. During the reception, Kyle approached Maya. "You know," he said, "I still think about how blind I was. If it wasn't for you and Henry." Maya smiled. "But you saw in the end. That's what matters." He nodded. "We all did." Eventually, that evening, Ezra found his mother sitting by the statue alone, her fingers brushing the bronze letters of Henry's name. "Think he'd be proud of me?" he asked softly. Maya turned, eyes filled with warmth. "Ezra, he already was. The day you were born, they sat there together in the fading light. The campus quiet, peaceful, and as night settled over the Henry Thomas Academy, the wind moved gently through the trees like a whisper, like a promise, that no act of kindness, no honest job, and no humble life would ever go unseen again." Inside the school, one of the janitors, Mr. Rivera's uncle, turned off the lights for the night. As he walked down the hall, he paused before the portrait of Henry that hung above the entrance. He nodded once, then whispered, "I see you, brother," and walked on. Because some men don't build empires. They build legacies, one sweep at a time. In the years that followed, the Henry Thomas Academy didn't just grow in reputation. It became a living example of what it meant to lead with service across the country. Schools and communities began implementing the Thomas Code, a simple but powerful ethos inspired by the man who had once been dismissed as a nobody. Respect every role, honor every hand, never underestimate quiet greatness. Ezra Henderson, now a graduate of Columbia University with a degree in public policy and ethics, returned home at 26, not to rest, but to serve. While offers poured in from think tanks and high-paying corporate offices, he quietly declined them all and stepped back through the doors of the academy, not as a visitor, not as a student, but as its new director of character and leadership development. "I'm not here to change Henry's dream," he said in his first address to the students. "I'm here to protect it." He started programs that reached beyond the school, partnerships with local shelters, mentorship for kids from underserved neighborhoods, and internships for students to work alongside custodial and maintenance staff, not for punishment, but for perspective. Every student had to log 10 hours a year, learning from the very people who kept their world clean, running, and safe. "Let them see what most never see," Ezra said in his proposal. "And maybe, just maybe, they'll begin to understand the power of humility." Every Friday morning, The school broadcast a segment called Voices of the Academy, a short profile of someone working behind the scenes: cooks, janitors, groundskeepers, security guards, each sharing their story. The first episode featured a woman named Linda, who had worked in the cafeteria for 22 years. "I watched Henry mop these floors when no one said thank you," she said, holding back tears. But he smiled anyway. He used to say, "Gratitude is a gift you give, not one you wait to receive." The school board, once hesitant about Henry's humble legacy being too unconventional, now fully embraced it. Grants poured in. Educational journals wrote case studies about the janitor who changed everything. Universities taught leadership seminars based on Henry's values. A best-selling children's book titled The Man with the Mop became standard reading in classrooms nationwide. But despite all the accolades, Ezra kept his focus grounded literally. One rainy afternoon, years after taking on his role, he noticed a small leak in the hallway ceiling outside the science wing. He found the nearest closet, grabbed a bucket, and placed it under the drip. A young student passing by looked confused. "Mr. Henderson, why are you doing that? Isn't that the janitor's job?" Ezra smiled and knelt beside the bucket. "It's everyone's job to care for what we love," he said. The boy didn't respond immediately, but the next morning he was seen picking up trash around the courtyard during recess, unprompted. That's how it spread, quietly, like Henry. Maya, now in her 60s, often visited the school. She no longer carried her camera, but everywhere she went, people still called her the girl who told the story. One afternoon, while walking with Ezra through the halls, she paused before the large mural that students had painted on the gym wall, an image of Henry, half shadow, half light, one hand holding a blueprint, the other gripping a mop. They really did see him in the end, Maya whispered. Ezra nodded, and they never stopped seeing him since. She turned to her son. "Are you happy?" Ezra looked out over the courtyard, where students were laughing, teachers sharing coffee, and maintenance staff being high-fived by kids as they passed. "Yeah," he said, "because this place, it remembers, it chooses to remember." And it was true. Every student who graduated from the Henry Thomas Academy received a diploma embossed with a quote that had become their guiding principle: "Build with your hands, lead with your heart, be the difference no one sees coming." Henry Thomas. The words were more than just ink. They were a promise. A decade later, Ezra stood once again on the stage of the auditorium, this time as head of school. The occasion, the 40th anniversary of the Academy. Alumni packed the seats: doctors, teachers, artists, engineers, authors, each with a story about how their life had been shaped by the man with the mop. Ezra looked out, his voice steady. "You've all heard Henry's story. Some of you lived it. Some of you are living it still, and some of you have passed it on to your children. But I want you to understand one thing. The legacy isn't the statue. It's not the name on the wall. It's what you do when no one's looking. It's how you treat the person sweeping beside you. It's how you show up with humility, with love, and with strength that doesn't shout but shines." The crowd stood in silence, deeply moved. Then Ezra raised his hand and pointed to the rafters, where an old, polished mop hung in a glass case, right beside the school's first blueprint. "That mop built this school," he said softly, "and it still is." When he stepped off stage, a small girl, perhaps 7 years old, rushed up to him. She wore a tiny maintenance club badge on her shirt. "Mr. Henderson," she squeaked. "Yes." She held out a drawing. It was a picture of her and Henry smiling, with a giant golden heart between them. "My daddy told me about Mr. Thomas. He said he was a hero." Ezra knelt down to take the drawing. "He was. And so are you, because you remember him." And just like that, the legacy of the janitor who had been called a nobody lived on, carried not just in stories or statues, but in the hearts of children who had learned to see the extraordinary in the simplest of souls. Forever sweeping, forever building, forever seen.